The general consensus on the talent trees, generally, is incredibly favorable so far. The two classes that we've been given, people generally seem, particularly with Death Knight, and people are happy about balance as well. Very happy. I think very happy about balance. Those are the ones I've heard about, and I've seen people who I tend to think know their shit online saying that they're really happy with them so far, and that they are kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is giving loads of options and kind of experimentation and what have you. As a boomie can confirm. Okay, cool. So for me, the most satisfying thing so far, the kind of problem that people instantly started identifying with Covenants, for example, and with Azerite armor. So with Covenants and with Azerite armor, those things hit the PTR, the alpha, the beta, and instantly people were like, these are potential problems. And they were big things. Some of them turned out not to be big potential problems, like, for example, Door of Shadows breaking the game. Everyone remember when all of WoW, YouTube, and Twitter was literally convinced that Door of Shadows was going to break the game? And that you were a fucking idiot if you didn't go Venthyr, because Door of Shadows was so much better than everything else, and it was a game breaker. And basically, there's no point even having the other Covenants, right? Because if you didn't, whatever spec you were, whatever class you were, if you didn't take Venthyr and go Door of Shadows, you were literally like playing the game wrong, and you were letting down everyone on your fucking raid team. And like, I fucking remember, because I remember how much fucking shit I got in this chat right here, who are supposed to be people who like me, in this chat, when I said, I don't know, I don't think Door of Shadows is going to break the game. I don't think it's going to... Guys, I don't think Door of Shadows is going to break the game. People were up in this chat being like, Tally, you fucking idiot. This is why you shouldn't be allowed to talk about WoW, you fucking shill. You absolute dickhead. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's gonna break the game, Tally. It's gonna fucking... This is as bad as when you said that the first raid in Classic might get killed in like a week or so. 2 times I've got like massive amounts of hate for shit I've said, WoW related, in this chat. The first was when I said that the first raid in Classic would be beaten in like 10 days. People went nuts. People in this chat went absolutely haywire. They were like, fuck you, Tally, you scum, how dare you say that? It's gonna be up for weeks, months. The fire resist gear, Tally. This proves you know nothing about Classic, you fucking scrub. And I doubled down. I was like, not only do I think it will go down in 10 days, but I think it won't even be a full fucking raid group that does it. And people were like, oh my god, Tally, if I was in the same room as you now, I would murder you. I'd rip off your head and I'd spit down your neck because you're such an idiot. Such an idiot. How dare you? You're saying that Classic is a bad game. Fuck you. It was the same with Door of Shadows. It was the same with Door of Shadows in the Shadowlands alpha. Everyone was like, Door of Shadows breaks the game. Fucking disgusting talent. Oh, it's the worst, man. You just got to get rid of it. And I was like, I think Soul Shape is better. I think Soul Shape's better. And people were like, fuck you, Tally. Don't you understand that if you had Door of Shadows in Nyalotha against N'Zoth, you could bypass an entire very difficult mechanic? So everyone would have to be Venthyr. It's like, yeah, but I don't think they'd put a mechanic like that in Shadowlands. I don't think they do that. You're forgetting they haven't designed the fights in Shadowlands yet. And they know that Door of Shadows exists. So, I mean, there's that. And people, oh my god, I thought people were going to, like, find where I live and lynch me, honestly. So sometimes the community is very, very wrong when it comes to potential problems. We were right about Azerite armor as a community, right? Not necessarily for the reasons we thought we were right. And that's also an important differentiation. Azerite armor was incredibly shit, but not necessarily for the reasons people said it was going to be. But whatever, it was still fucking shit. We were right about Conduit Energy, obviously, being terrible. Although it wasn't such a big deal, Conduit Energy. I maintain that if 9.0 hadn't gone on twice as long as it should have done, No one would have given a shit about conduit energy. Various other things here and there. But the really satisfying thing is, to go back to my point, is that so far, there's no, massively obvious problem with these talent trees. And that's my big fear. Because if there was a massive, obvious problem with these talent trees that didn't get addressed for some unknown reason, what would happen is that it sucks all of the life out of any conversation about Dragonflight as an expansion. You couldn't talk about Shadowlands for a couple of weeks, like a month. You couldn't talk about anything except how Door of Shadows was going to break the game. When there's a thing, it's like a black hole. It sucks out the life out of all the other conversation. All the air gets sucked out of the room and there's only this thing that you can talk about. And so far, that hasn't happened with any of these trees. Now, I have no doubt that it will. I've got a feeling, clearly there's going to be at least one tree, more than likely 4 or 5. More than likely one of them is going to be a rogue tree. More than likely one of them is going to be a warlock tree. More than likely, one of them is going to be a shaman tree, mark my words, and I wouldn't mind betting a demon hunter tree as well. There's going to be some trees that come out where people are like, this does not work. Whether they're right or not, and, chances are they'll be right. People know what they're talking about, right? There's also a chance they'll be actually wrong. But whether they're right or wrong isn't really important to what we're talking about. There are going to be some trees that come out where the community will decide this shit doesn't work. Blizzard will disagree with them. It won't get changed in the way they want it. And that will, for a time, suck out all of the air from the room and from the conversation. 100% Shaman will be one of those trees. One of the Shaman trees, or the Shaman tree in general, will be that. Mage is probably a good shout. Mage, Rogue, Shaman. Shaman is the one. If I had to bet on one of them, it would be Shaman. Evoker hasn't got the player base. Evoker hasn't got lifelong Evoker players to cause that stink. So whether people like the Evoker trees or not, it wouldn't matter. It's not going to cause the same amount of discord, as it were, as a shaman tree that the community decide doesn't work, or a rogue tree or something like that. Because people aren't, when it comes to the trees, don't forget, people aren't just neutrally checking if it works or not. A lot of people have a kind of a bias or vested interest in it as well, in terms of their position in raid and stuff. Generally, the top players don't, because the top players will play any class, they don't give a fuck. So it's usually class of player a rung or 2 or 3 below them who play the game enough to be very, very knowledgeable about the game, but main a class. And have always mained a class, and that's their class, right? The upper middle tier is what I would say. The upper middle tier. They're the fuckers you gotta watch out for. Always. Those fucking middle upper tiers. Oh! And by middle upper tier, I'd say people that progress Mythic as casually as you do, right? If it's possible to have a casual Mythic player, that's the upper middle tier, I'd have said, right? I can see one of the mage trees being that. I can definitely see a shaman tree being that. I can definitely see. I can definitely imagine. Oh yeah, a fucking monk tree. You're right. I mean, I could see it happening with any tree, but the ones I would expect it to happen, definitely a mage tree, definitely a shaman tree. Mark my words. Are the little circles on the talent trees the number of points you can put into them? Yeah, and currently, on this version of them, and I don't know if this is true or not, but you have to put the maximum amount in before you're allowed to move on. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case in the actual trees, or if this is just how they've interpreted it in kind of programming this into Mythic Trap, but currently you have to use all of it to be able to move on to the next one. That's not how it worked on the old talent trees. It seems like an intentional restriction to limit how many end tree traits are possible. Yeah, it sounds likely, doesn't it? I don't think it's a massive big deal, but I think it does feel better to not be like that. I can completely understand their reasoning behind it. It would be really nice if they could find a way to not do it. In my mind, my criteria for these talent trees to be a success is that they are at least as varied, build-wise, as the current system. That's my only criteria. Because even if they are exactly as varied and give you exactly as many options as the current system, they're still better because people just prefer trees, right? So even if like you don't actually gain any real options, but you have at least as many, they're just more fun. So they're already better. So my entire criteria for them being a success is that we don't lose anything. You wouldn't think that's a particularly hard bar to hit. Are you referring to the current talent system or current overall system, including legendaries and soulbinds? Oh, now that's a good question. I was just talking the current talent system, but yeah, are you losing something by not having like legendaries, soulbinds, and borrowed power, right? You know, for you, do you think that it needs to be at least as good as the talent trees and borrowed power? Way more varied, but so much hate on forums because people saying they're missing their baseline abilities like interrupts. Yeah, I feel like that is a massively overblown complaint. I feel like when they're talking about missing baseline things like interrupt, and interrupt is a great example actually, I'm certain that they are angry about it in principle, because in practice, I don't think it's an issue. It's a non-issue in practice. I think a lot of the complaining and hate you're seeing around the idea of not having an interrupt baseline is 100% ideological, if you like. They are objecting to the principle of it rather than the application of it. Because I don't think there's anything to complain about. Like, in principle, I don't disagree with them, but I think the application is so, like, it's just not an issue. It's a non-event. The main problem with talenting interrupts is that you know you're going to end up in groups with people who don't pick it when they should. Lots of players already don't use it when they have it baseline. So yeah, so wouldn't you prefer that those players who just don't use their interrupt anyway at least are doing a bit of extra DPS? If 25% of players don't use their interrupt now, wouldn't you rather that at least they were doing a bit of extra DPS? If practically 25% of players are specced out of interrupt now because they just refuse to use it, at least they'd be doing a tiny little bit of DPS, right? That gives them an excuse not to use it. So like, it's more important to you to be the moral victor in the argument that they have no excuse not to use it now, but they're still not using it. It's more important to you to be the moral victor. You've got a person who is not using an interrupt and refuses to use an interrupt, and you prefer the scenario where they're doing less DPS and not interrupting, but you have the moral high ground by saying they have no excuse, than a scenario where they're still not interrupting, but they are doing a bit more DPS. You do prefer that. Fair. Okay, well, okay. Never underestimate my need to have the whole moral high ground. Yeah, exactly. I know that's gonna. And you know what? I'm probably on the same side. I'd probably be you. But those who do use it now shouldn't lose out on DPS. No, which is why I believe that every talent tree should have directly below their interrupt another talent which gives you like a reward for using your interrupt. Loads of classes have that already, whereas if you interrupt, it like reduces the cooldown of something or gives you like a little proc of something really quickly. Classes have that already. I think that should be standard. I think that should be standard for interrupts. The reward for the interrupt is you don't get your fluids drained. Oh, I know, but just like, that's not enough.